You signed on. We're being recorded, just so you know. So glad you signed on tonight. I have some very, very good news. As I mentioned at the first program, and there are two more after this, and I hope I will remember to say the same thing. This is about the solutions to climate change. It is not so much, hardly at all, graphs and numbers and charts and anything about whales and stuff like that, okay? This is about how we all together can help solve this. And please, I subscribe to Greta Thunberg's philosophy. No one is too small to make a difference. Everything we do can add up to a positive result. And tonight's program is really, really a key in this whole series. They're all important, but this one is about 24 minutes long, and it's how to reduce the sources of the emissions. As they say in Project Drawdown, reducing the sources is the first thing we concentrate on. After that, they show us how we can also draw down what's already up there and make things better and help people's quality of life, which all works together to have a better result. Our guest question person tonight will be Carl Maselli, who's a retired engineer, along with Chris Caius, who's on the Kane County Board and also the chair of the Kane County Forest Preserves, and Robin Migalla, who's with Elgin Green Groups, Trash Talk, you may have seen her already, and also attends the Sustainability Commission. So let's get started, okay? It's going to be one program tonight, and then we'll have questions and answers afterwards, okay?
Okay, so now we're going to talk about reducing the sources of greenhouse gas pollution. I already told you that this is going to be key to addressing climate change. We're going to stop the problem before it even gets into the atmosphere. And that's the way we need to begin. So we're going to zoom in and look at all the different contributors to the sources of greenhouse gas pollution and how we can bring these things down to zero and stop the problem at its tracks. Well, what are the sources of this greenhouse gas pollution to begin with? Well, you've heard of a few of them, but some of them are going to be kind of surprising. One of the places we should begin is the biggest emitting sector of greenhouse gases, which is making electricity. It turns out that burning coal in a power plant or natural gas creates carbon dioxide, and that is a big contributor to climate change. Overall, across the world, it's about 1/4 of the problem. In some countries it's bigger, in some countries it's smaller, but the globe as a whole is 25%. The next biggest source of greenhouse gases often surprises people, and it's 24%, is food. It turns out that growing food and agriculture and the land use associated with all of that together is about 24% of our emissions. Isn't it weird that electricity and food are about equal and together are half of climate change? We hear a lot more about the electricity space, though, than we do the food space. It turns out they're about equally important. Then we switch over to industry, kind of making all the stuff in the world. We'll go through a lot of those different things, but making steel and cements and plastics and other things, as well as managing waste, is what's happening here, and that's 21% of the problem. Then we've got transportation, moving us and our goods around the planet, whether it's a car, a truck, a plane, a ship, and whatever. That's about 14% of the problem. Then we go to buildings. Buildings cause about 6% of climate change. But to be fair, buildings also are using a lot of the electricity. They're responsible for some of the industrial emissions to make the components of buildings. And of course, transportation takes us from building to building. So buildings directly from their furnaces, their hot water heaters, boilers, and air conditioners emit greenhouse gases, but they have a big effect on a lot of the other sectors. So how we build buildings and what we do with buildings and the design of cities is crucial throughout all of those wedges of our pie chart. Then we've got the remaining 10%. That's a lot of different things, but it's actually dominated by the energy industry. It's going to be responsible for things like fugitive emissions, the kind of leaks of methane and natural gas that aren't intentional, or when they flare off natural gas in an oil well, or the emissions when we refine crude oil into things we use like diesel fuel, gasoline, and so on. So energy industry and a few other things show up in that last 10%. But look at the first 5. It's kind of amazing that only 5 things, electricity, food, industry, transportation, and buildings, cause 90% of climate change. Well, heck, that's just one hand. We can solve 90% of the problems with just this. That's pretty good. So let's go through each of these sectors and kind of see what can we do to reduce these emissions and eventually bring them down to zero. So we're going to look at each sector, and then we're going to dive into particular solutions, and we're going to show you how at Project Drawdown we've tried to estimate the size of these different solutions and which ones might work best. So let's start with electricity. Electricity, again, produces about a quarter of the world's greenhouse gases. And the production of electricity burning fossil fuels, especially coal and natural gas, causes those emissions. But we can also look at how electricity is used. Most of the world's electricity is used in buildings for lighting and air conditioning, heating, refrigeration, all those kinds of things. And about the other half or so is used in industry, making stuff, big industrial, big machine processes. The rest is about 2%, and that's used in food and transportation and everything else. So buildings and industry are the big users. Well, let's make this kind of real. Burning coal and natural gas in a power plant is what produces these emissions, and that's what makes electricity, and sometimes we use the heat in a power plant for something else as well. We take that electricity, we put it in buildings, industry, and everywhere else. And the kind of electricity we make is associated with the electricity that's in the grid, but also the greenhouse gases we put in the atmosphere. For example, burning coal releases about 2 pounds of CO2 for every kilowatt hour of electricity we use. Natural gas is a little less. It's more like 1.2 pounds of CO2 for every kilowatt hour we produce. Then we have solar, wind, nuclear, and other forms of making electricity that don't produce any CO2. So this is a big difference between the fossil fuels electricity and the non-fossil fuel electricity. It's a huge, huge difference. Now let's make this real. A kilowatt hour is what we use to measure electricity consumption. A kilowatt hour is like using 1,000 watts for 1 hour. A hairdryer uses about 1,000 watts. So if you turned on a hairdryer and left it there for an hour, that's 1 kilowatt hour of electrical use. Pretty simple. Well, the average American home uses 1,000 kilowatt hours every month, on average. Some use more, some use less, for all the different things we use electricity for. Well, if we do the math, 1,000 kilowatt hours on America's electrical grids, which releases on average about 1.4 pounds of CO2 for every kilowatt hour, that means an average American home is responsible for over 16,000 pounds of CO2 pollution, or over 8 tons. That's incredible. How would we reduce that? Well, we already kind of know, don't we? We can have energy efficiency. We could reduce the use of electricity. No matter how the electricity is made, we could probably cut it in half with better lighting, better air conditioners, better appliances, and so on. But then we can also switch the way we make electricity to things like renewables that don't emit any CO2 at all. So that 1-2 punch of efficiency and transforming to renewables is key here. While Drawdown, we looked at those solutions not at your home level, but at the larger economy level, at the whole planet. And we looked at a whole bunch of solutions that could enhance efficiency, many of which are in buildings and automation, are all listed here. And we also looked at ways we can shift electricity production away from coal and gas to things like solar and wind, hydro, geothermal, biomass, nuclear, and beyond. We also have to do a few other things, by the way, like improving the grid. We have to have electricity dispatched and stored in new ways to accommodate renewables. And we also have to have more flexibility in how electricity is used. But if we put all these things together, a whole bunch of efficiency solutions, a whole bunch of solutions about producing energy in new ways, and improving the grid, we have an enormous suite of climate solutions right here in electricity. In this picture, each of those solutions is represented by a single circle. The bigger the circle, the bigger the climate solution. Some of those circles actually have 2 rings, an inner one and an outer one, and that kind of represents a range of estimates we've made about how big that solution could be over the next 30 years or so. So there are a lot of good solutions here in efficiency and making electricity in new ways. Really exciting. Well, let's look at food. Food's also a big emitter of greenhouse gases. Again, about a quarter, 24% of our emissions come from food. A lot of folks, though, think the food emissions come from things like moving food around or food miles you might hear about, or if we grow food maybe organically or with conventional ag or GMOs. We talk about that stuff all the time, but it turns out those aren't the big issues. The really big issues in agriculture emissions for climate change are actually three other things. They're deforestation, kind of burning down forest for new agricultural land. Most of the deforestation on the planet today is happening in Brazil and Indonesia and a few other countries. In Brazil and Indonesia, we're clearing a lot of land for cattle and soybeans that are used to feed animals, mostly in Brazil. So animal agriculture is hugely responsible for deforestation there. In Indonesia, it's mostly for palm oil, being used as a cooking oil, mainly in China and India, but also used as kind of an ingredient in a lot of other foods. The next big area is methane from our animals and a little bit from rice fields. And again, animal agriculture is really important here because cattle and cows burp methane, as we talked about before, and that methane builds up in the atmosphere, causing a big level of new climate change. Basically, we're gonna have to rethink meat and dairy products in order to reduce those emissions, either having a lot less of it or growing it in really different ways. Then we have nitrous oxide, that gas I talked about before, which is often produced by using fertilizer too much. Whether that's fertilizer that's chemical fertilizer or manure, they both have nitrogen in them. And if we put too much on a field under certain conditions, that nitrogen can come off into the atmosphere as nitrous oxide, a major greenhouse gas. A lot of the rest, by the way, will run off into the water and cause pollution in streams and watersheds and lakes and even entire oceans. So managing nitrogen and fertilizers is going to be a real big problem, both for climate change, but also for ecosystems and our water. So to solve those problems, we can again look for efficiencies, things we can do to reduce the pressure on the food system. It turns out the biggest place to start is food waste, because we throw away about a third of the food grown on the planet. Food waste is so crazy. In rich countries, we use far too much food and throw away a lot of it, and it's never even eaten, and that's just tragic. In poor countries, though, food waste is often about the same number, but it happens closer to the farmer, because maybe the crop didn't get to the marketplace. Maybe it rotted in storage, or it never got on the truck, or the train broke down. So we lose food there too, and the farmer loses their income. Kind of a double tragedy. So food waste is actually a huge problem, not only for climate change, but food security and a lot of other things. It's a problem worth solving. We also have to think about diets. I showed you how meat and dairy products were responsible for a lot of the big drivers of these emissions. So eating more plants and less meat-based products is a really simple, kind of easy, thing to do. If meat and dairy are responsible for a lot of emissions, let's eat a little less of that stuff and then grow what we do eat better. We also have to protect ecosystems from being cleared. Can we put up big fences and just say no to deforestation, stop them in their tracks, make sure we don't clear forest, and especially forest with peatlands under them that have carbon in the trees, but carbon in the peat below ground. But then finally, we can also improve the way we farm on the lands we still are farming. That's going to be a whole bunch of different things about using water better and nutrients better, tilling the soil less, putting on cover crops, all sorts of things. And you'll hear a lot of excitement about regenerative agriculture, which kind of mimics nature's way of doing things as we farm. Regenerative agriculture and these other farming practices can reduce emissions a lot, and that's really crucial. Later, we're going to talk about the potential of some of those farming techniques to not only reduce pollution, but also create new carbon sinks that might absorb CO2 and put it into the soil. That's pretty cool too. But for now, we're just talking about reducing the emissions from farms. Well, let's put all this together. It turns out by looking at all the food solutions, we see food waste is huge. Changing our diets can be huge. Protecting ecosystems, especially forest and forest with peatlands below them, are really important, and farming differently is a major contributor too. So the solutions to the food system climate problem are partly due to us, partly things about ecosystems, and partly what's happening on the farms. We can all do our part here. Well, then let's flip to industry. In industry, we make a whole bunch of things that take high temperature, very intensive processes to make, like metals, especially steel. Steel is a big contributor to climate change. Cement. Making cement releases a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere. Our chemicals, and also plastics, things like that, each make some CO2 as well. By the way, we hear a lot about plastic being a big climate problem. It is. It's about 1.5% of climate change is tied to producing, using, and disposing of all the world's plastic. Definitely a problem, but it's even more of a problem out in the larger environment because it's affecting marine ecosystems and causing pollution all sorts of other places too. And then finally, managing waste. And the gases used in managing waste, but also released from landfills, is crucial. We're going to look at that too. So we're going to look at all sorts of industrial processes, manufacturing and materials, and how we process and manage waste across all of those different domains. At Drawdown, we've looked at a few already and put numbers on them, like what can we do with cement, what can we do with plastics, and then we look at a specific suite of chemicals called refrigerants, which are all these fluorinated gases. It turns out that fluorinated gases like chlorofluorocarbons are very dangerous. Back in the 70s, we realized that chlorofluorocarbons were actually hurting the ozone layer way up in the upper atmosphere. They also contributed to global warming. But we phased out most of those chlorofluorocarbons and replaced them with hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs. Those don't hurt the ozone layer, thank goodness, but they still contribute to climate change. So they're ozone friendly, but not climate friendly. We're going to probably have to replace them again and replace them with climate friendly refrigerants and make sure that none of the existing refrigerants leak and get into the atmosphere. We've also looked at ways we can use waste as a resource. Rather than throwing something away and never using it again, the kind of recycling, repurposing, and actually using energy from our waste streams is a really clever idea, which makes just all sorts of sense. So if we think about improving materials, especially refrigerants, and using waste as a resource, we have a lot of solutions already appearing in the industrial sector. We've got a few more to work on, especially steel and a few other things, but we've got a good start here. Then we got transportation. Transportation is about 14% of the problem. Most of that is on road transportation. 10 of that 14% is in roads, cars, trucks, things like that. The flying we do, aviation, is a little less than 2%. That's all the commercial and military aviation on the planet is about 1.8% of global emissions. Everything else is another 2% or so. That's going to be ships and trains and other things. But mainly it's roads, planes, and the rest. CO2 is made here, that's pretty clear, by burning the fuels we use in transportation. Gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel. When we burn these liquid fuels, it releases carbon dioxide into the air. Well, let's take this to everyday life. Like imagine a gallon of gasoline. You pick up a gallon of water, it weighs about 8 pounds. Gasoline's a little bit lighter, call it 7 pounds. If you burn a gallon of gasoline, which is mostly made up of carbon, you add oxygen to it, 2 atoms of oxygen for every one of those carbon atoms, that 7 pounds becomes 20 pounds of pollution. And that 20 pounds of pollution goes into the atmosphere right out of your tailpipe and goes into the air and stays there for centuries, long after you're dead. Can you imagine that? Just burning 1 gallon of gas releases 20 pounds of pollution that could be up there for 1,000 years maybe? That's incredible. So it turns out driving the average American car, which gets about 25 miles per gallon, driven about 15,000 miles a year, produces almost 12,000 pounds of CO2 pollution, which will last for centuries. That's about 6 tons of pollution. It's more than your car weighs, is what we put in the sky by a big margin. Fuel efficiency is crucial though. If we go from 25 miles per gallon, which is crazy low, to 50, which is just kind of modest with this day and age, we can actually take that 12,000 pounds and bring it down to something like 5,000 to 6,000 pounds. That's a good step. Planes, again, use about 1.8% of the problem here, and that's caused by just burning aviation fuel in those planes, releasing CO2 as well. But we're getting a little bit more efficient in aviation. Today's planes use about 50 to 60 miles per gallon equivalent for every passenger on the plane. It'd be like driving a hybrid car. But the problem is you're going a lot of distance really fast and you can keep doing it. So when we think about transportation, we can look at efficiency, making the current things more efficient, like fuel efficiency in cars, more efficient airplanes, more efficient trucks, and so on. And we can also look for alternatives to fossil fuel transportation, like walking, bicycling, mass transit, or video conferencing, where you don't have to go anywhere to hear other ideas or meet other people. Those are all really great. And then we can switch from a liquid kind of hydrocarbon fossil fueled vehicle to an electric vehicle. Electric cars are here to stay. They're better. They're going to be cheaper. They're going to be fun and useful and cheaper to operate. We're getting electric trains, of course, electric trucks and other things. This is really crucial. But putting this all together, efficiency of our current vehicles, shifting to other ways of getting around, and then electrifying our new vehicles, there are a lot of great solutions to transportation. Okay, let's get to buildings. They emit directly about 6% of greenhouse gas emissions, but again, they're affecting electricity, transportation, and other areas as well. But what buildings emit directly within their building envelope are primarily from residential buildings. About 2 to 1 of these emissions are from homes and apartments compared to public and commercial buildings. So we're talking a lot about homes, apartments, as well as big public buildings too. Well, we emit greenhouse gases directly from buildings in our furnaces and boilers and hot water heaters, because they're going to burn natural gas or maybe fuel oil, heating oil, things like that. And those emit CO2 right from your basement. But buildings can also release refrigerants from air conditioners and refrigerators kind of accidentally if there are any leaks in your air conditioning equipment or your refrigerators and your freezers. That's why we always should be tuning those up and watching them. In a typical American home, we actually use a lot of natural gas to heat our spaces, especially in a cold place like Minnesota, where I live, or to heat our hot water for taking showers and things like that. And we measure natural gas in what are called therms. A therm is 100,000 BTUs worth of heat, and that's what your gas meter is measuring it in. The average home in a cold part of America uses about 1,000 therms every year, and that would add up to about 13,000 pounds of CO2. More than your car in a lot of cases. So again, we have to think about electricity and transportation, but also the energy used within our buildings, often as natural gas or heating oil, in order to tackle climate change. So that's why building efficiency matters so much. A lot of buildings are still too inefficient. They leak heat out, they pour heat in during the summer. We can make buildings really much more efficient. We can always build new green buildings, of course, but we're going to have to do a lot to retrofit the hundreds of millions of buildings that already exist. Then we got to shift to new energy sources that don't burn fossil fuels to heat our homes, cool our food, and give us nice hot showers. And we've got to pay special attention to the refrigerants in air conditioners and freezers and refrigerators, because when those leak, they become a kind of super pollutant, causing disproportionate climate change. When we look here, we see energy efficiency, shifting energy resources, and addressing refrigerants are going to be the crucial aspects of buildings in climate change. Let's wrap up here. Now we've got the last sector, which is everything else, the other category, about 10%. A lot of this is from the energy sector itself when they flare off natural gas in an oil well, or what are called fugitive emissions, which are kind of the emissions that escape accidentally from a fracking well of natural gas, or a coal mine, or a leaky natural gas pipeline. These are things we should demand the energy industry address right now. These are super low-hanging fruits that if the energy industry cared at all about this, we could shut off like 6% of climate change today. So what have we learned? We've learned that attacking the sources of greenhouse gases are the first biggest step to addressing climate change. And there are big 5 areas we should be focusing on: electricity, food, industry, transportation, buildings, and so on. And we can see those here. But then inside those major sectors, we have hundreds of little areas that are all really important to address if we want to solve climate change. There's absolutely no silver bullet here. We do a lot of individual things between flying and cement and plastic, electricity and buildings and food and meat and everything else. All of those little things contribute to climate change. So we're going to have to do a lot of little things together to solve climate change. There are many sources, therefore there are many solutions. We're not going to solve climate change simply with a solar panel, or by eating less meat, or not flying, or not using cement. We've got to do a little bit of all of that stuff. And usually, one of the repeating lessons we saw here is start with efficiency, wasting less energy, wasting less material, wasting less food. Those are all really crucial. And then switching what we do to something that doesn't emit greenhouse gases. We can still make electricity, but do it differently. We can eat food that doesn't emit greenhouse gases. We can make stuff and live in places and get around without any fossil fuels at all. So between efficiency, where we usually start, and transforming the economy to a low carbon economy, we have some great solutions to tackle climate change.
That was our great session number 3. And by the way, you can see any of these anytime, free, online at YouTube, Project Drawdown, Climate Solutions 101. And I will try to put that link up in the chats in case you want to watch them. I've watched them now 4 times and I still get more out of them when I watch them. So any questions today from anybody, please unmute yourself or share a question in the chat box or raise your hand if you feel like doing that. Do we have questions for Carl, our resident engineering guru? Okay. And I got to tell a short little story. Carl is so skilled at engineering. He's had many awards and lots when he did his job when he was working. But one time he told me, you talk about reuse, he saw a sewing machine by the side of the road in his neighborhood, I guess it was, and he stopped to look at it. He said, I wonder why this doesn't work. Took it home, took it apart, and I think he said, if I recall, there was some, hadn't been used obviously in a while, and the oil or something in the needle shaft, something had hardened up, and that's why it didn't work. He was able to fix it. There is a perfect reuse of a good sewing machine. So a lot of times we can fix things. We don't have to throw it away and get a new one. Anyway, any questions for Carl? Anybody in our audience? Jennifer, Barb, Dolly, Maureen, Michelle, Mickey, and Sandy. Somebody else has a good name, Sandy Skolsky. Any questions? Maybe I'll ask Carl one to start with. Okay, and this is not from Dave. So what did you think about this particular session, Carl, since it's technically oriented? You got to unmute.
I know. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, really what he's saying is, let's grab the low-hanging fruit first. And that really makes an awful lot of sense. No question about it. A lot of opportunities. He mentioned many of those opportunities. Yeah, I'm a guy who sees stuff that doesn't work. And even if I can't fix it, I've learned something every time by taking it apart, examining what it was that failed. And if I can, I fix it. And as far as the sewing machine was concerned, what happened was that there was some gears that drove the
needle
vertical mechanism, going up and down. And yeah, the grease in those gears had hardened. It just got so hard. So I dug it all out and then put in some lithium grease to replace it. Lithium grease is much, much better than some of the earlier greases. That was an old sewing machine, but it works great. I still use it.
Okay. I will say it made me feel, I never tried, I've sewn since I was a kid, and I have now a much higher tech sewing machine that I have to look at the directions every time.
Right.
But Carl took apart the machine and fixed it. But I have to tell on you, Carl, you said you were going to make some masks. That was a harder thing for you to do, maybe than taking the machine apart and fixing it, right?
I did make masks. I probably made 12 to 15 masks. And in fact, I used one today when I took my driver's test.
Good. Oh, boy, you passed, right?
I did pass.
Oh, good, 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 good. Okay. One thing I noticed about this series, I just love Project Drawdown. When I first found the book about 5 or 6 years ago, and there's been a subsequent summary book that kind of puts it all in perspective. I try to look for things that we can do as individuals, because after 12 or 13 or 14 years, you get kind of tired of waiting for the government. The government can't fix everything. We got to do part of it. We got to do a big part. But one of the big things, and a guy I used to know that was in this way before me, Dave Siegel, if you remember him, used to talk all the time about energy efficiency, energy efficiency, energy efficiency. And I got tired of hearing about energy efficiency. But you know what? When you dig into it, you can save 30 to 70% of your energy at home with simple energy efficiency measures. When you get to the 70%, you're probably going to be spending a little bit of money. But this gentleman that's running this program says anybody can easily cut your energy use at home in half. So
Sandy, can I speak to that?
please do.
So we do have a couple of questions coming in. One's coming in through the chat. Now we have a second one coming in through the Q&A. But to speak to what you just said, I have a friend that stopped by one day because I have solar panels, and he wanted to know the details about how do you do that, because it's like, until I had somebody hold my hand through the process of getting solar panels, it seemed a formidable thing. And so I was grateful that somebody who I knew showed me their solar panels, showed me what that looked like, showed me how to find an electrician to do it. And so he was doing this project, and I said, Commonwealth Edison offers energy audits, and when they do, they'll come out and help you figure out where you have some energy leaks. And they give you a bunch of LED bulbs and low flow shower heads and smart
Thermostats?
Power strips, and really good deals on smart thermostats. Anyway, he saved so much money after his energy audit that he figured out that it wasn't going to be worth it for him to put solar panels on. So anyway, he saved, I think, around $40 a month just changing out his light bulbs and going to a smart thermostat.
That's great.
Anyway, so I want to respond to the question about, is it possible to get more bike racks downtown? That's a great question.
Yes.
And what I would recommend that you do is reach out to the Elgin Sustainability Commission and let them know that you want that, because there is a person on our system, as a matter of fact, the chair of the Sustainability Commission is really passionate about bikeways and bike racks and all that stuff in Elgin. And I'm sure you will find a receptive ear. And if you want to discover to get a hold of the Sustainability Commission, you just have to go to cityofelgin.org, and they have a bunch of menus. One of them is boards and commissions, and then just find the Sustainability Commission and you can send them emails. The meetings are the second Tuesday of every month at the center at 6 o'clock, right, Sandy?
Right.
Yeah. So everybody is welcome. They're fun-filled meetings. So everybody's welcome.
And you can also do them on Zoom, but I think you have to email and ask for the Zoom Connect, I believe. Isn't that right, Robin? You've been doing that longer than I have. You have to get the Zoom invite, or
No, I don't think you can do Zoom to the Sustainability Commission now.
Maybe
I think
just for the commission members.
Yeah, just the commissioners. Yeah, the general public doesn't have access to the Zoom.
And by the way,
anyway, I hope that answers that question. And so then we have two more questions in the.
can I quickly add that bike rack person? many people know him. He worked at the city for many years in planning, I believe it was. Tom Armstrong. He's retired now, but he's the chair. And he would love to talk to anybody, I'm sure, about getting more bike racks. So.
Okay, so we got 2 questions in the Q&A. So Barb Noose is asking, how do the green climate solutions for electricity available to Elgin residents fit into what we just heard, especially regarding our new proposal to be presented to the city council soon? So I'm just going to tell everybody what that new proposal is, and that is the new proposal that went through and got voted on by the Sustainability Commission to be presented to the Elgin City Council is to aggregate 100% renewable electricity for the residents of Elgin. And so we were aggregated at one point, and that was an opt-in that you had to do if you wanted renewable. Municipalities do electric aggregation to kind of usually help people, residents, save money because it's like a big group buy. This proposal, then you would have to opt out if you don't want renewable energy supplying your home. So, but it still has a little way to go. It has to go through the city council to get, but we have a city council now that seems to be very friendly to the environment, and they passed an emergency climate resolution. So they're on board for the most part that we do have a climate problem and that they're willing to start working on solutions.
And so one quick thing to that, in case you have friends, neighbors, anybody asks about it. One difference between this plan and previous ones is the cost is exactly the same as what you pay for ComEd. It's not, if ComEd goes up, this goes up. If ComEd goes down, this goes down. So there's no fee or any kind of charges for going green. And this saves you a lot of money from putting a solar system on your house, although that is the best way to go. And that's a very permanent solution. These contracts, I think, are usually 2 or 3 years. They have to be renewed.
Yeah.
So, and this is actually on your house, or if you go community solar, where you buy into a community solar system, you are buying into a program that's making the energy too. So those are the best ways to go. Anyway, just wanted to add that.
So would somebody like to answer Jennifer Ford's question about the timeline with electric cars? Carl, unmute.
Mute, Carl. Unmute.
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah, it appears, I don't know what the timeline is. I mean, some of the manufacturers have said that they're going to be 100% electric car manufacturers by, I think Volvo is probably the one that's earliest, but the rest of the major car companies in the United States have made a commitment to making more and more solar cars. What's the timeline? I don't know. I really don't.
I did hear Tom at one of Sustainability Commission meeting saying that they, as a commission, can, how did he put it? Request that be included in some of the plans that they're going to suggest to city council. And I think that's coming out in Biden's proposed clean energy, the package for the infrastructure. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the infrastructure bill. Mhm.
Yes.
And I think also we do need a lot more of them. And to be totally honest with everybody, I try to be, I want to see if I have a electric gas car, a PHEV that runs on electric till I run out of charge, which is usually at about 38 or 40 miles, and then it switches over to gas. I have no range anxiety. the best is to go all green, but honestly, right now, I don't want to deal with range anxiety, and we're looking to hopefully find one for Dave. He's got a regular fossil fuel Camry, unfortunately, and we are gonna try to find, it's called PHEV, that's the dual, or you can go hybrid. Hybrid gets, I think, 50 now or more from just a hybrid, but that still uses fossil fuels. Robin is braver than I am. She's gone all electric. So hooray, hooray, hooray. I'm glad some people do that, obviously.
So to add to that, first of all, you may discover that our infrastructure, particularly in this area, is better than you think.
Okay.
There's an app you can put on your phone. It's called PlugShare, and you can see where there's all kinds of charging stations. And I drive a Nissan Leaf, or I ride a Zero motorcycle, and I have not had a problem getting charging stations in the area. Pretty much every oasis has electrical charging stations. Many shopping malls have charging stations, many of them free. I just found a great little charging station in Rockford at a microbrewery where you can like have a lovely brew while you're charging up, and it has both an L2 and a Tesla charging apparatus. So the infrastructure is actually better than you think, particularly in this area. Now, if you want to do long distance, that's another topic. Although I have pre-ordered an Aptera. Check them out, aptera.us, because my car will have 1,000 miles of range on a single charge, and that'll pretty much get me anywhere I can go and stay awake doing it. So, and there's a whole lot of new EVs coming on board. 2021 was a banner year for a lot of EVs coming to market. Ford F-150s are now in an electric version. Rivian, great truck company, put in a whole charging system on the Pan American Highway in South America to help Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman take their electric motorcycles from the tip of Argentina down at the bottom all the way to LA. So so the charging networks are better than you think. Just get that PlugShare app and check them out. So
Robin, there's a question again, another one for you from Barbara News.
okay.
What's your range?
So my range on my Zero motorcycle is, well, they're both cars are about 100 miles, or the Leaf is about 100 miles and the motorcycle is about 100 miles. But you know, that's affected by weather. When it's really cold, it's a lot less. And you have to remember that, you know, you want to do a round trip because
got to get back.
You know, it's like, it's a long time to charge. Like, so it, you know, it gets me around town. I am looking forward to a better range, but the new, so my Zero motorcycle is a 2014. The new ones get 250 miles.
Wow. And
the lowest level Aptera is going to have a 300-mile range. A Chevy Bolt, which is a really great EV, that has a 250-mile range. The Tesla 3, and these are like getting into the affordable range for people. Even the newer Leafs are inching up to you know, 180, 190 miles now. So EVs are coming to market, and there's like a lot of companies have them now. So do your research. There's some great YouTube videos of people that review the EV vehicles. So the ranges on these cars today, you can expect 250 to 300 on a pretty, you know, a reasonable price point entry vehicle.
Here's another thought I want to tell everybody, especially Barbara, what Robin told me when she got her Leaf. I mean, we're all cost conscious in retirement, and she got a used one.
I got a used one
for much less cost than the brand new, because the EVs do cost more. And of course, everybody knows a brand new car. I kind of prefer a 1-year used car or a demo
Yeah.
So somebody else can eat up that cost of that new car smell. But anyway, oh, Robin, how long did it take you to charge up in Rockford while you were enjoying your?
So it was an L2, it was a 220 charging station. It was a couple of hours, maybe two and a half, 3 hours.
Charged all the way up then, huh? Or-
Yeah, I got pretty close. Uh-huh.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I was camping with friends and they got a non-electric site, so I had to charge up before I could get home. And then Randy Cycle put in a charging station, so they're in Marengo and he's about halfway.
Okay.
And that's Randy Cycle in Marengo is where you can buy zero motorcycles, and you know you can just go and ride them for the heck of it, just to try them out. If you throw your leg over one, you probably will never go back though.
I wouldn't bet on that for me. I'm a little iffy with my balance there.
Yeah.
I go nowhere without my stick.
Yeah.
Not a cane, it's a stick. I don't want to take a header. Anyway, that's me. I'm a chicken.
Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts? Chris?
I wonder, are we looking at eventually replacing all of the pumps that we have in like in Kane County? There must be hundreds of them
Yeah.
in order to run electric vehicles. So when I drive just down to the county board and back, I'd probably pass, I don't know, just 50, 100 of them. On a practical level, eventually, are we going to have one electrical charging station for every pump that we have now, do you think?
I wonder, Robin or Carl, do you have ideas on that? We have to have a lot of them because they take more time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things with battery technology. They're trying to find ways of charging batteries much, much faster. I think that's one of the real downsides to owning an electric car. There is a finite amount of time that you have to charge them up. You know, if you have one that goes 400 or 500 miles and you've got a charging station in your garage, you can always depend on getting back to your house and charging it up. And usually overnight, not a problem at all. But to have to wait somewhere like at a rest stop for 4 hours to charge up your 350 mile car.
Well,
see,
yeah, but
when you-
most of them have the quick charging today, which gets you about 80% in 20 minutes.
Wow. 80%.
What is I think the other thing you have to look at, if you keep doing that, will it damage the battery?
Yeah, that's the thing that's changing now is the quick charging that's coming to market now doesn't have the same impact as like mine. It definitely degrades the battery life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
That battery will die faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'd
I
like
think
to
they're-
mention something else. My Volt, which is the PHEV hybrid electric, I've had that 7 years now. And I've had, I think I might have had 3 oil changes total and no repairs on the car except a flat tire. That's a whole different item, but it's amazing. You're not in the car repair lot and this does have the small gas. I still don't understand that, but the gas engine makes the battery work or something. I don't know, but it's quite a thing. It's quite a thing to have even the PHEV, and that's the in-between one.
So Jack
I-
just asked, are there going to be solar powered electric vehicles? And actually the Aptera that I have pre-ordered is a solar powered electric vehicle. And in our latitude or whatever you want to, I don't know the right word, but it should get about 35 miles per day on the sun. So that's going to be a good thing. And actually, I should announce that this Saturday at the old Gail Borden Public Library's parking lot is going to be an EV. It's the beginning of National Drive Electric Week. And there'll be a bunch of EVs there. my motorcycle and my Leaf being two of them, but though there's a Tesla and there's a Bolt, there's a couple of other cars. A lot of us are willing to let you try them. If you have a motorcycle license, you can try the Zero. Otherwise, you can try the Leaf. So, and I'll have some brochures for Apteras and maybe some cookies if I'm successful in my baking endeavor.
You're
So
always,
come on out on Saturday, 10 to 4 for an EV show.
her cookies are great, by the way, the ones I've had, the
Well,
successful.
these are new, so
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to put an Aptera logo on them. So
What time does it start Saturday, Robin?
10,
10, okay, till how long?
4.
Okay, 4. And we will be at Occupy from 1 to 2, right? now.
No.
So,
Which-
okay.
You'll be occupying the same space, I think.
Right. Okay. I hope everybody took a note in this program. One of the very, 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 very first things I ever heard on climate change way, way back. A speaker was at a place I went and he said, there are no silver bullets to fix this. He said, and you've probably heard this, it's going to be silver buckshot, a whole lot of things that we do as many of as we can, as much of the time. I think I'm going to have to calculate again. With our solar roof that Dave and I have had for about 5 or 6 years now, maybe 5, because we're still getting the SREX paid for. So I think with that and LED lights and being more energy efficient as much as we can around the house, I'm pretty sure our energy usage is less than that 1,000 kilowatt hours he talks about for being the average home. I think we're around 400 or so. We have a little problem in the wintertime with our 4-season porch, but that's another story. And I think people don't realize, you know, LED light bulbs, they're so cheap now. They're not expensive. And as far as I can tell, Carl can correct me if I'm wrong, they last 10 times longer than incandescent, 10 times longer. Be careful when you buy them though. There's cool and there's warm. We got a couple cool ones in the bathroom and those had to go. We had to get the warm ones. So anyway.
It's the heat of the lamp. If you're in the 2,700 to 3,000 Kelvin, that's
Yeah.
that's how they measure. That's a warm white lamp. If you get up into the 3,500 Kelvin, it's more white, more ultraviolet in the light.
Is that 3,500 you said?
Yeah, if you're above 3,000
Okay.
Kelvin, yeah.
It's warmer.
No, it's colder.
Okay, got it. Maybe colder. The higher the number, the colder it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, one of the things he talked about was increasing efficiency, and one of the places where they're doing a good deal of work is on solar panels. You know, solar panels have, even at the very, very best laboratory made silicon, I think the maximum percentage of conversion of to electricity from sunlight is about 33%, 33.4%. And the panels we use, because they're made in mass production, not in a laboratory, are probably somewhere between 23 and 25, maybe somewhere in that range. Okay. Scientists are working, and the reason for that is that the silicon that's used only captures a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum from the sun. And there are and so what they're looking at are coatings on top of the silicon that could add more, could capture a wider range of the the spectrum of energy coming from the sun. If they could do that and increase, say, the efficiency, or double it, let's just say double it to say 50 or 60%, that would really, really, really have solar take off. One of the materials are, and they can sputter these materials on. Sputtering is an interesting kind of an activity, a scientific activity. But It's gallium arsenide. Gallium arsenide has been used for a long time in making semiconductors. It was one of the earliest of semiconductors, but that's one of the ones they're looking at right now. And in the laboratory, they're doing a really good job of getting much more efficiency.
Good.
I don't know who takes care of chat. Who takes care
We're
of chat?
watching. We all do. If you see something, or I'm trying not to miss anything.
I see there are 10, but I'm not sure how to look at them.
Oh, I see 7.
Oh, Carl, if you just click the chat box, it's got a scroll bar. You can go back
Oh, I see.
and scroll back.
Okay. I see what you're talking
Okay.
about.
You see that?
Yes.
Okay.
And Robin, I saw the pictures of the Aptera ones.
Yeah, it's a three-wheel vehicle.
How do they talk about safety with those? Because they're lighter weight, right?
Yes, actually, I think they're about to start like the crash tests with
Okay.
the vehicles, but it's a carbon fiber body,
Mhm.
which can be very strong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they've got good engineers working on all this stuff. And there's a plethora of YouTube videos. If you just get on YouTube and type Aptera, there's interviews with the design specialists. I just watched one the other day with the guy working on the little solar panels that are going to be on the front and what they're doing there. So there's all kinds of, and they have a forum you can get involved. Carl would probably love it because they talk tech over there.
Uh-oh.
All the science is discussed, and people all over the world are contributing ideas, and the company is just really open and transparent about what they're working on, and they're working with the public to redesign things. They're using AI, they're using hemp as part of the interior. It's totally, yeah, it's really a great company. So
Sounds neat. That's good. One thing I probably interrupted when you were talking about energy efficiency, the audits. I should mention those are free from ComEd. When I first got into this, and Robin was in it and several others. The only way we could get a free one was to have 10 people over to watch how they do it, and then they contacted them. Or Dave and I actually paid, I think, 50 or 80 for the first one from NICOR way back when. I believe NICOR does a free energy audit also, and ComEd will do free ones. At least I know ComEd does. And then a package of free goodies like low flow shower heads, low flow washer things, light bulbs. They give you those funny
smart power strips,
sponge things for your hot water heater.
Oh yeah, the insulation for your hot water pipes.
So it's free. You just have to call them. They're I think they're getting reimbursed probably from the other FEJA, and now CEJA, Clean Energy Jobs Act, that got passed. So the solar rebates and those kind of things will continue. It was nip and tuck at the end, and it was a very difficult fight between Sierra Club, which I'm a member of and is sponsoring this also, and along with the Gale Board and Library and the League of Women Voters. But the Sierra Club fought really hard to get CEJA passed, and it was difficult because it had to get into a middle zone of compromise between the nuclear and the Prairie State thing, that it's very, very, very hard to negotiate out of that because there's so much money involved there. But they reached a compromise where the solar can continue, and job training to get people away from the coal mining jobs, get all the coal-fired power plants shut down, I think by 2030, is it, or 2035? And Prairie State and the Springfield one don't have to close till 2045, which is very, very aggravating to some of us, but we had to get this passed. I'm in favor of the nukes. Because they're here already and they're clean as far as fossil fuel emissions. And that's what's going to do us in before, I think, any nuclear waste problems, which is bad. So anything else people noticed in this, in this program that you'd like to ask about or talk about, and we have
Yeah, we're
2
just
more
about
sessions
it.
coming.
Yeah, we're just about at end of time.
Yeah.
So is there anything anybody would like us to cover before we sign off? Thanks for asking your questions. Great questions.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. And
And
thanks
for coming.
Yeah. Also, our next one, I believe, I have to check my notes, is Nancy Lammy and Jean Muntz talking about my favorite current topic, regenerative gardening, which is kind of like regenerative agriculture. If we help nature, Mother Nature, I don't know if I want to call her mother, we can draw down the greenhouse gases, you know.
Yeah, and this is for all the gardeners out there, because they're the ones that are behind Start in Your Yard.
Yeah.
And it's about doing natives in your garden, and they're gardeners extraordinaire and lovely ladies. So please join us.
And I think it's one of the newest things they're talking about when they get the big ag people and the farmers to do no-till and do
Cover crops.
And that. The whole point is not to have any soil bare. You have things growing on it, and natives, we have to help. I'm sorry to say, you have to help the bugs. If the bugs don't live, we don't live. Bugs feed the birds. Birds feed higher animals. We all are in this food chain. So anyway, any other questions? Any other comments? Everybody's going green, right? Green.
Absolutely.
Greener.
Yeah, Barb asked a question in the chat if there's
Yeah.
Start in Your Yard videos. Yes,
Oh,
check
yeah.
out Gail Borden's YouTube channel and just search for Start in Your Yard. There's been a bunch of them, and they were
Great.
all like fantastic, really great
I
topics covered, that
just
whole
watched
series.
the one on invasives in your yard, which I have plenty of, and I'm trying to get rid of them. That's a great program. That one in itself was,
Yeah.
and we hired that gentleman to come and help us use his dragon to get rid of some of our invasives. He hasn't started yet, but he's going to do it. No chemicals. But anyway, so take care, everybody. Be safe out
Okay.
there. Hang in there, and join us again next time. Okay, there's 2 more, and you can watch